Hey everyone, this is Beacon the Poi Mechanic, and this is video number 2 of 3 in a series that has everything to do about ropes. Now this is going to be a long one, but to make it easier on you, if you're watching on YouTube, you can click on the video description, and I've had timestamps in there where you can click on and it'll take you to the different sections of the video you might want to see. This video I'm going to be talking about ropes and how each rope might affect your trick differently based on the characteristics the rope has. Now, I won't be able to cover all the tricks or all the ropes that are out there just because there are way too many, but I'll be going over the main ropes that I know that will be affecting your tricks probably the most. The next video is going to be a complete review on all the ropes that I happen to have, which is a lot, and all the ropes I've had experience with over the years. That video will have much more detailed information on which ropes will do which tricks. Now, just know in this video and all videos that I do that I'm just going off personal opinion. Everybody's going to have a different experience, so definitely keep that in mind when you're making your selection on rope. And yep, let's get started. So each trick is affected by the characteristics of the rope that you use. We'll talk about stalls, for instance. If you're doing a stall with a rope that doesn't stretch, you stop your hand and the head stops. When you do it with a stretchy rope, you stop your hand and the head continues to go. Now, especially when you're doing an upward stall, you have a spring-loaded rope that's going to come back faster than gravity would normally let it fall. So you have to compensate by either moving your hand with the head more or pulling your hand down faster when it springs back. When you're doing a stall with a stiff rope and you hold it from the actual rope itself, if you're not holding it in the direction of the stall, a lot of times, since there's so much stiffness right here, once you stall, the head's going to go pulling the rope a little more straight. That can affect your stall, but I would recommend if you're using a stiff rope to point the rope in the direction of the stall that you're doing. With a thinner rope, like I have on this smithy rope setup here, I noticed that when I'm doing a stall, the rope has to be much more taut, like there needs to be tension on it, because if there's any bit of slack in there, then when I do the stall, that slack kind of comes out at the last moment and it will kind of throw the head off. I noticed that with the thicker rope, it kind of leads the head in a way that when there's tension pulled off of it, it's much more smoother and less jerky, if that makes sense. This setup has a really stiff part of the rope right here because of how much it's worn and just this rope sucks. So this part is much more flexible, and I find that if I'm doing a stall, a lot of times the stalls and stuff and tosses will be thrown off because of how the rope is acting stiff up here and how it's nice and loose right there. I kind of prefer a rope that does both, like a stiff rope and something that has a lot of slack to it, so I can do stalls if they're going in that direction with my hand like this. This is the VPC rope that I have, which it does both. It's stiff and it's floppy. So it's all personal preference, but yeah, that's my opinion on stalls. Tosses. The stiffer the rope, the better. And that's because when you do a toss with a stiff rope, it's going to spin around and retain its shape, land back in your hand exactly where you expect it to. That's why you see a lot of jugglers using 1/2 inch or more cotton or static ropes. Now, when it comes to springy rope, the centrifugal force is keeping the rope taut, and then when you let go of the handle, it throws the handle off a little bit because the rope's coming back into its original shape. You can kind of compensate by putting heavier handles on, which lets the rope keep its even tension all the way through the toss. Now, I went through a lot of ropes trying to find the best for doing tosses, and for me, I figured out the test is how well it does slide tosses and floats. So a float is where you're letting it spin. You go to the horizontal position, you let it go, and it goes up and comes back down. If the rope has any weird characteristics in it, if it's not stiff enough, for instance, or springy, a lot of times the handle will be just off to the side a little bit from where I expect it to be. I used to spin with this Enduro braid from New England Rope. It's an amazing rope, and I absolutely love it, but I was noticing when I was doing floats that the handle would kind of come off to the side a little bit, and especially if I'm trying to do behind-the-back tosses, it just really would not work very well. The rope has some weird characteristic to it that kind of it's kind of like a heavy rope, and it kind of throws things out of whack when you let go of it. I was noticing the same thing with slide tosses. When I would do a slide toss, and a slide toss is where you're holding onto the handle and then you throw the head to your hand and the rope goes through it, and then you throw the head back and you grab onto the handle. When it was coming back to the handle, the floppiness of this, a lot of times would just throw the handle all around and it would just throw the trick off. Same thing was happening to me with this setup, especially with this setup. I think it's just because it hasn't worn in yet, because I know a lot of people use this and love it, but when it comes to doing slide tosses especially, it just seems like the rope was a lot more floppy than I'd want it to be, and my floats, the handle always comes off to the side when I do it. Also with the head, if it's spinning just a little bit out of orbit when you let it go, it's going to throw it's going to throw a little bend in here, and so it's just not as accurate as I like. I used to spin this stuff, which looks like pretty much a bigger version of the smithy rope, and it's polypropylene. And I noticed that it has a lot of twist in it. When I let go of the head, if I had a little bit of twist in my hand when I was letting it go, the rope would absorb that twist, and it wasn't going to affect the toss as much. But with stiffer rope, when I went to this, it seemed like I really had to be much more precise, because if I had a little bit of twist in my hand when I let go, the twist would carry all the way down the rope, which would throw the orbit of the toss off. The last set that I used that had the polypropylene on was this set. And I really was noticing my tosses being affected with this particularly, because the rope gets so dang stiff because it's just really crappy rope. And so it's stiff to this point, but down here it's floppy. So when I was letting go, the springiness or whatever was being amplified in this stiff part. And so it would throw the whole handle off about that much. The best rope that I've found for tosses, and I'm going to keep talking about the VPC rope, is the VPC rope. It is just, it's got the perfect stiffness to it. It does the floats, it does the slides, but it does all the tangle stuff or the air wraps and stuff that I want too, because it also has this really nice bend to it. All right, and let's go on to Tangles. Tangles. I hate Tangles. Probably because I suck at them so bad. I decided to build a set, though, for learning Tangles better, which is this setup, because I see that some of the best tangle artists out there are using this smithy rope, and so it has made my learning a lot easier. Problem with this rope is that it tangles, so you spend more time untangling it than you do learning tangles, at least in my experience for me anyways. This stuff is really good because of how many times it twists, and you want a rope that has a little bit more twist to it, because when you're doing tangles, you're constantly putting on and releasing tension from the rope. And so since this stuff twists so many times, it works really well. You can do orbitals with this setup. I can do a pretty dang good orbital without swivels on it, just because of how many times it does twist. Now, this thicker rope like this that doesn't twist, this is the static rope. It's going to be really hard to do tangles because you're going to be constantly releasing pressure like that when you're doing it. Plus, it's like so stiff, I don't think you could even do a +1. A +1 is where you add an extra twist to it, and with this, it's so thick, it's probably hard to do, if at all. That being said, this really thick stuff from Flow on Fire that Logan Harris uses, he does all the tangles that you can imagine just fine, and they, he's doing the +1s and stuff, and I think that's because, this stuff does have a lot of flex to it, and it does have a bit of a twist to it as well. That's why I think the polypropylene stuff works pretty good for it as well. It's basically the same solid braid as this. Other than that, I really can't say anything more about Tangles, but Orbitals. I love Orbitals. I know a lot of people hate them, but whatever. When I was starting out with Orbitals, I was using this MFP rope, which I liked a lot because it would have some kind of a give to it, and it had the nice little twist as well. So it was much more forgiving than doing it with a stiff rope, for instance. And that's because, like, when you connect the ropes together and you pull apart like this, that little bit of give allowed it to slide together a lot easier versus the stiff stuff that either slides off or it just doesn't work sometimes that good. You also kind of want a rope that has a little bit of a flex to it like that, because when you're putting the two ropes together, you want them to be able to do a 90 degree. It's a 90 degree. I have also been spinning with Technora. That's been really great. I love this setup. It does wear down a lot quicker just because, you're constantly doing catches with it and stuff. Although it's not too bad. I definitely recommend this setup. It just kind of dreads a lot if you're using it in non-fire applications. Like when I was using it outdoors, it seems to to get dready, but it hooks up super, super well. Flow cord, I know a lot of people that do orbitals with flow cord. I really hate the stuff, but that's just me. I know the springiness factor helps with it as well. I think the reason I probably don't like it is because of the weight of flow toys, just their normal setup. With the thicker stuff, I was able to do orbitals really well. The fatty cord, definitely like that. This setup here is the VPC rope, and I was honestly pretty surprised at how it worked. I really didn't know. It took a lot to make, but it does orbitals really well. It was the stiffness kind of had me a little concerned about it, but I didn't think this stuff would work very well. This is the dynamic stuff from Flow on Fire, but I got to try a set a couple days ago, and I was blown away by how well they worked out. Flow on Fire has a setup where they actually have somehow figured out a way to put swivels on this stuff. And yeah, it's great, a great setup. I'm probably going to make a set like that sometime soon. It does have a little bit of stretch to it, so I'm assuming that probably has something to do with it. Now, as far as putting swivels on your rope, it really depends on what rope you're using. Like this stuff right here, the reason I put the Technora on there is because I'm able to put a seamless transition between the swivel and the rope. This setup, it was really hard to make. I could probably show people how to make it on a video if I get enough response to it. It's definitely it was kind of an endeavor. I had to run was it a Technora or some kind of rope on the inside of here? So I basically ran it through the loop and then doubled it up. It made it thick enough to fit inside this rope, and I epoxied a cap on the end that went into the flow light or whatever. And then I had to do the same thing on this end, and then I fused the fibers together with a little bit of epoxy that I heated up the shrink wrap, and when it shrank on it, it made this perfectly uniformed transition underneath here. So that's pretty neat. Now, when it comes to rope like this, it is a pain in the ass. I've got a video out there on how to do it, but I basically broke up the fibers into 6 strands since it's a 12 strand. I ran this part of the fibers through a swivel and then chopped this part off and then melted it to itself. So yeah, each rope is going to have a little bit different approach to how you're going to be able to put swivels on. Now, as far as getting a good orbital down, I recommend having a little extra rope right here, because if you have the swivel inside of the handle, like a lot of them are, you have to point your hand in the direction of the swivel, or in the direction of the orbit, because say this is the handle right here. If you're holding it like this rope won't spin very well. It gets locked up and then it pops over. Where if you have something like this with this extra bit of rope on here, you can hold it like all the way over here, and it will still keep the swivel in the right direction. And that's really good if you're doing like behind the back or between the leg type orbitals where you can't really get a perfect point at the orbital. So anyways, that's it on orbitals. All right, tether traps and whip catches. So a tether trap is where you're holding onto the handle and you throw the head into your hand, and then you use that loop to grab around a tossed handle, so it traps it like that. The thinner the rope and the floppier the rope, the better, or the less stiff, I should say. Dan Bitleski, which is like the godfather of tether traps, he uses a rope that's the same size as this. His is from Play Juggling. It is a polyester double braided rope, and he uses the same handles as this as well. This stuff just really locks up really good because it creates a smaller loop and it conforms to the ball a lot better. I've been learning on this style rope, and it's definitely doable. It's a little harder because the stiffer the rope, the bigger the loop that it creates. Stuff isn't all that thick, but it still doesn't quite grip on there as much as I'd like it to. So a lot of times I'll have to kind of do like a stall where you like throw your hand into the stall. I kind of throw the motion in towards the grab, so it gives it a chance to kind of conform around the ball instead of being jerky and stuff. So I know that the static rope is going to be pretty much impossible to do it with. I was doing it with my buddy's setup the other day, and the loop that it creates is just so big that the ball or whatever handle you're using kind of flies through it. Granted, I was using 3D printed knobs, which that flat surface, I just haven't had really good luck doing it with it. You can definitely do it if you have a floppier rope, but that flat slick surface makes it want to fall off a lot easier. And then on to whip catches. So whip catches are, the way I do them anyways, I'll throw the ball up into the air, or I'm sorry, the poi up into the air, and when the handle is in the upright position, I'm using the head of my other poi to grab it like that, and then the whole thing keeps rotating, and then eventually comes off into a toss where you grab back onto the handle. Once again, much easier to do on a thin rope setup like this with these handles. Some of the best artists I've seen out there that do this do it with either these handles or the palm grips from Lantern Smith. I've been doing them as well with this same rope here, but it's definitely a bit more difficult just because there's, I don't know, it's just too big, I guess. But I'm definitely learning how to do it. Trying to do that with a static rope, I think, would probably be the same as tether traps. It's just probably not going to work out very well. So anyways, let's go on to contact. So when it comes to contact, there is a wide variety of options to be used, and they're all being used. I see everything from Dan Bitleski using, thin rope that's short with play knobs and 80 or 90 millimeter heads. I see Greg Haskins using super, super long ropes on his setup. Logan Harris using this 1/2-inch cotton with 3D printed knobs with 0 weight in the handles. I use 100 mil heads with 200 gram weight with heavy handles that's usually filled with something, and this VPC rope. I even use swivels on some of my contact setups. I've used everything. This stuff works really good for contact, except for doing fishtails. I find that with fishtails in particular, I want a little bit thicker of a rope, something that has a little more girth to it, or something that will stay somewhat rigid. This is incredibly hard for me to do fishtails with. I know that's just me, though. So yeah, there is no perfect way out there. It really comes down to whatever works good for you. Anyways, I know I didn't cover a lot of the tricks out there, but I wanted to go over the ones that I felt were probably the most affected by the rope that you use. If there's things that you didn't like that I was saying, it's just remember, it's my own personal experience with this stuff. I know everybody has different setups that they use and they like better than the other. I would like to hear from you, though. If you have any comments or questions about ropes that you use, please leave it in the comment section below. I will be doing a video probably in a day or so that's going to be a complete rope review. I'll do a review on everything that I've dealt with, plus everything that Flow on Fire sent me over. They sent me a lot of this over, everything they had. If you want a Flow on Fire coupon code, if you look in the video description, I'll leave a link there. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, all under the Poi Mechanic. If you like the video, please hit that like button and subscribe. And yeah, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.